Shulodd and hello, Zell Amals. I am Matthew Carauddo, author and developer of Diamond Dragons, and today we chat with varying artists, our diamonds in the rough. Today on Diamond Discussions, we're here with Janina Franck. So, Janina, introduce yourself. Let us know what you've been writing. It's great to have you here.
I hail from Germany, but I have lived in 4 different countries at this point,
Oh, wow.
10 years of which was in Ireland, which is why I write in English.
Oh,
I write a number of different genres. So far, I have only published fantasy and sci-fi, but there will be more to come in the future.
I like that. That's great. And then, so you say that you've published, or have you written about 10? And then earlier we were talking and you said you've published 2, or were there more?
I've published 3 novels.
Excellent. And then you have one that's upcoming, is that correct, right?
That is right. This one will be a sci-fi novel.
Oh, very good. And what's the name of that one? Or are you not allowed to release the name yet?
Oh, no, I can tell you.
How great. I love a mystery.
So this... Yeah, so this novel is actually based on a short story I wrote by the name of A Spark in Space.
Ooh, I like
and
the name.
Here's the cover.
If you want to learn more about Janina's wonderful work, you can look in the links in the description. What made you want to become a writer?
That wasn't really so much a choice.
Really?
As it just kind of became part of who I am.
Oh, very good. Well, tell us about that. Like, tell me, what is it that kind of brought you down this road? Because I completely resonate and understand that sometimes, like, you probably resonate with Tolkien, where if you don't keep your feet, you just never know where you'll end up.
Yes. Mm-hmm. So for me, that journey began very, very early on. I started writing my first novel when I was 11, and I kind of never stopped.
That's great. Well, what's the name of that novel, or did you ever actually give it one, or when did you give it a name?
Well, it has a name, but it was never released, and it will never be released.
Really? Well,
yes, it's never going to see the light of day.
Well, now that you said it and it's on this interview, one day it's possible. Well, don't you think even editing, your 11-year-old self would thank you?
Maybe. But there would have to be a lot of editing.
Oh dear. Well, with every book, right? With every work.
True.
Yeah, I've been, of course, doing my best to research as many writers as possible, because, of course, Diamond Dragons is my first book. I wouldn't say that I'm new to writing at all, but it's definitely my first book. But what I have found unequivocally from all sorts of different authors and all sorts of different writers, whether screenplay or just books or poetry, is they always say you write your work at least twice, if not more. Because you make your draft, then they're like, you could call it editing, but really it's rewriting the entire thing a second time. And if you're really lucky, maybe you don't have to do that. You're going to go straight to actual editing, where it's only just fix this. But often I've talked to some people, they say, you know, Matthew, I wrote my book 3 times. You know, it was 400 pages and it took me this long, and then I went back and it took me exactly the same time or thereabouts to rewrite it. And so I think that's something that many many people who are readers only, they probably just do not comprehend this. What do you think?
I would very much agree. I am notoriously an underwriter, so I have to add almost as much to the story as I've originally put down when I go through it the first time.
I like it. That's a good term. I've not heard that term in that specificity, but I like that, an underwriter, because I would say that I feel somewhere in the middle when I wrote Diamond Dragons. I found that when I went back, I added more than I took away. I certainly did both, but I did find that when I began, I believe I finished with like 115,000 words or something, and I ended up with closer to 140,000. I'm not sure of that, but like, in other words, even after cutting, I ended up with more. But the irony is, it was not a bad more, it was a good more. It was where the work became more streamlined, and then places where it required development, I was like, we need to know more about this character. Type, 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 type. We need to know more about this environment, because people will be like, I don't know where they are. Click, 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 and so on. And so I think I would say I resonate with that. When I went back, I went, why did I only write one sentence about this entire place that we're in? What am I, crazy?
I have the exact same experience.
That's cool. Although I would also say this, what do you think of the term, and I've been using this a lot, stream of consciousness? Meaning, when you are approaching only the writing process only, so not editing, not reviewing, not obsessing, not punctuation, none of these things, that you're just saying, oh, I need to feel my characters in the story. With stream of consciousness, I find like I let that go, and I don't try to edit as I go. What about you? Do you find that you do that you just in one mode writing, and then later you come back, okay, I'm putting on my editing hat? Or how does it go?
I usually start my stories by stream of consciousness, certainly. So the first 10,000 words are usually just, I write whatever comes to mind without really thinking about plot even. And I always think that it's more important to get the story down and then come back to edit later, because otherwise you end up obsessing over certain phrasings, over certain paragraphs, and it's not important at that stage. It's more important to get the story finished and then come back.
I agree 100%, or at least that's what I felt in my own writing as well, is that, and I found myself actually offering some of this advice on groups, even though I'm a new writer. The irony is I'm not new to performance and theater and film and storytelling as a whole, because I've been an actor and done all these kinds of things that all revolve around the process of not just telling a competent story, but showing a competent story. And I found that I have to put myself in writing mode, which I feel is, like I said, stream of consciousness. Then later I'm gonna review mode, where I'm just gonna read it. I'm not even gonna probably edit it, not unless that's a spelling, boom. Just keep reading to comprehension, and then I'll sit back and be like, yeah, I gotta edit this a lot. There's a lot to do. Then I hit editing mode, and then from there is usually I'm gonna say, show maybe to some friend of mine, right? And I can say, oh, what do you think of this? What do you think? Is it bad? Are you getting it? And either they're gonna say, oh, Matthew, I really like it, or I'm kind of confused by this one area here. And then I can repeat this process. Stream of consciousness, review, edit, give to someone, and so on and so on. And I don't know, I feel like it's a pretty good amount of advice because I feel that some people, and you probably will know what I mean by this, they edit as they write. What do you think of that? Because I don't find that to be a good idea.
I think it works for some people. Mm-hmm. I am not one of those people. And in general, when I hear first or second time writers and hear about how they're having trouble getting through the story, my advice is always ignore the editing, ignore everything you've written up to this point, and just focus on getting the story on paper. The skeleton is what you need right now.
I completely agree. And it brings me to another point to kind of bring up, since we're on these subjects. I'm enjoying this quite a bit. This is wonderful. Is that I have seen, and this relates, I feel, more to my experience understanding acting and performance in theater in a more eagle's eye perspective, or we'll call it a dragon's eye perspective, if you will, is that I've seen some writers say, I am struggling, and you go, why are they struggling? And maybe they explain it, and then, there's posts and people responding, and you eventually get to the point that they do not have a comprehensive, competent, and very streamlined end of the story in mind. Like, in other words, they don't know what the goals of their characters are. And so for me, this is a breakdown at a foundational level, because then what you have is, like, when you get in a car normally, right? Well, not with COVID-19, I guess, but the point is, when we get in a car and we want to go somewhere, we know our destination, we know where we're going, we have a plan. Now, true, some people say, sometimes I get in the car just for fun. I'm like, okay, that's fine, but you don't just write a book and say, today the characters, they just walk everywhere and do nothing of any import. It's not interesting. So I always feel that that's what's most important in telling the story, is that if people do not know where their ending is, their characters won't either. And that's when I found a lot of writers say they just keep writing and writing and writing and writing. And then they say, not 2 pages later, not 10 pages later, not even 40 or 50, they say 100 pages later, they're like, I'm lost. I don't know where to go. And I feel like my story's going nowhere and my characters don't this. And I said, that's because they are going nowhere. You're not writing a story. You're writing something where, and this happens, and then this, and this, and this, and this, and none of it is directed in any particular place because you don't have a destination in mind. Do you understand? What do you think of this concept?
So I definitely see what you mean. I think I look at it slightly differently.
Oh, that's good.
More important than the ending of the story to me is knowing what the goals of the individual characters are.
Right.
Because that is what is going to drive the story and what's eventually going to determine what the ending is going to be. And that might actually end up being something different than what you set out to do, potentially, depending on how you write.
That's a really good point of view. I like that. See, I think the nice thing is we don't necessarily disagree, but and even that's good. It's good to have healthy disagreement. But I really like what you're saying here, Janina, because it's still revolved around what do they want, what do they need, and how are they moving towards that goal, constantly looking for it, because eventually there's going to be a finish line for them somehow. So in a way we're talking about similar things, but yeah, interesting, different ways of going about it. Yeah,
it's a different approach.
Yeah, I like that a lot. Very good. So tell me about what's one of the most difficult books that you've written at this point. Like, I'm sure of course they all have varied levels, but what's one where you were like, oh Matthew, this one was a big trouble?
So I know exactly which one. It was a book that I wrote this year. And so it's an urban psychological fiction. A lot of it takes place in the character's mind, and there's a lot of question about what's real and what isn't real.
Nice, I like it.
So there was a point where I got a little lost along the way because I knew where it was going to go. I knew how it was going to end. I had the start, but the middle gave me a little bit of trouble. But I got through it, and it's down now.
That's awesome. Very good. And then what would you say? Do you have a dedicated editor that you work on, or have you found you have worked with several, or what's your experience with like editors in general?
So I definitely have one main editor that I usually end up going to. That being said, I'm not opposed to working with other editors as well.
Would you say too that you have found with the book cover art, you have worked with many different designers and been satisfied in different ways, or do you find that you just have one designer in mind?
So for the designs, I've definitely worked with different artists. So for my fantasy trilogy that I have published, I obviously did those 3 books with the same artist.
That makes sense. And what were those titles, really quick, just so for the audience?
So the series is the Chronicles of the Bat, composed of Captain Black Shadow, White Devil, and Sand and Snow.
Ooh, I love it. Those sound all very wonderful and scintillating and fantasy-filled.
I like them.
Well, you should. I hope so, as an author. Have you met a lot of authors too where they dislike their work?
Incidentally, no. I don't think any author who dislikes their work will still call themselves an author or go through with publishing it.
That's a really good point. I think that's a really good point, because I have found so often on these forums and threads or group, places where people discuss writing, some people will say, "Oh, I hate my work. I am having," and I've said, if you dislike it so much, then either change the story and the characters and the things, or edit so that you do like it. But why would you dislike yourself so much? It seems very counterintuitive, but I suppose I also understand that some artists, they will struggle because they're so hard on themselves,
Yeah, no, I absolutely understand.
Yeah. Do you find you're hard on yourself sometimes, or only because you're looking to make it the best?
I definitely do think that I'm hard on myself sometimes, but I do think that it's because I know that I can be better. So even now, when I'm looking back on some of my older works, I see all the ways in which I could have been better back then. But I also think that the reason that I can notice that is because I am better now. So I don't notice the same issues in my newer writing that I see in my older. And it's because I've learned from my mistakes.
Yeah, that's a really good point too, is that like independent of being a writer, as human beings, we all grow. I mean, you mentioned your 11-year-old self writing this novel, which I think is lovely. Actually, I am personally in favor of such things, that I think if every writer who eventually became a writer wrote something when they were a child and salvaged it and kept it, at least you would see this kind of interesting progress. Because right, like I'll give you a thought process that may be something to think about. So I was a fencing instructor for a very long time, uh, more than a decade basically at this point. But anyhow, I remember teaching youth, kids who were very young, and then they're getting older, so you see this development, not only them as a human being, but their skill set as a, fencing and whatnot. And so it's always interesting to kind of see where you began from, you know even if some people would say, oh, I was so bad, da, 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 da. But I'm like, but that's a good thing, because if you expected to start perfect, which a lot of people do, they walk into any new craft and they're like, oh, I'm going to try this. I think I would be such a good, like, people came even in the fencing. They would say, I want to learn fencing. I'm okay. I give them a lesson and they're like, oh, I'm so tired, Coach Matthew. Even adults, I'm so bad at it. I'm like, well, yeah, you are, but it was only your first day. What did you expect? And sometimes they're like, oh, well, I don't think I'll ever be any good. I'm like, really? How do you know? You only did it for one day. This stuff takes work. It takes dedication to improve to a level where others aspire to it. That's why we look at George R.R. Martin or Stephen King, or just any writers. How about oh gosh, who wrote The Princess Bride? William Goldman. Rest in peace. Uh, they didn't start as a good writer. They needed work. So I think it's good when people who are younger have things that they've written. Like, I wish I could look at my 11-year-old self, and see a lot of writings. I don't think I have that many. Well, let's see. I'll ask you a few last questions here. So, what do you think your worst writer's habit is?
I think that sometimes I might jump into the story too quickly and rush through things, especially toward the ending of the story, because at that point I'm just sitting there going, no, I want to get to the end. I want to get there. I'll get there. I'll make it today. And so things end up going too fast.
I like that. No, in a way, that's a good bad habit to have. It's better than a lot of them, but so that's a good one to bring up. I think I might need to watch out for that. What's your best writer's habit, do you think? Something that you really feel proud of, that you've developed, and something you feel strongly about.
I think my characters are really good. And that's also something I've been told a lot by readers, that they liked the dialogue, they liked the characters, their motivations. They felt that they were real rather than just characters on paper, that they had more than two dimensions, essentially.
That's wonderful. Isn't that great too,
Yeah.
when your readers, they're the ones who affirm the work that you have put in?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm quite proud of my dialogue and my characters. I'm
That's
quite happy with them.
What's one of your favorite characters? I mean, I obviously have so many books, but if you had to just name one, just for the audience, what's a character that you'd want them to look out for when, not if, they go and look at your books?
Could I name two?
Of course, you could name as many as you like if
That
you.
I would. Okay. So on one hand, it is Selena. She is captain of a group of pirates. She's a very strong female character who doesn't take any crap from anyone. And I love her for that. She is present in all of the Chronicles of the Bat books, and the main character of the third book in the series.
I love it. And then what was the second one that you said you wanted to mention?
The second favorite character I have is an Irish crime boss by the name of Saoirse Kennedy, whose novel I am actually currently writing. But I've already written about a dozen short stories about her in the past. So great. She's already pretty fleshed out.
I love it. Well, that's good. That sounds great. And, so the audience can look out for that now that you guys know a little bit about those characters. What's the worst advice you've ever been given? Other than being on this show. I'm just kidding.
So the worst advice... Ooh, okay. So there are two things, I think.
That's fair.
One was that I was told I had to have chapters, which I think is nonsense. I don't think there should be a rule in place for a story having to have chapters. Because if the story doesn't need them, why put them in? You need to base it on your story and what your story requires, not what somebody else's expectation of it is.
So, Janina, what's the best advice that you would offer to writers out there? So not necessarily the best advice you've been given, but the best advice that you'd now offer to other writers and artists.
Okay. The best advice I can offer to anyone is, first of all, don't bother thinking about what the market wants. Write what you want. And the second part is just keep writing. Once it's on the page, you can always make it better. But no one except you can put it on the page.
It's a really good point.
So,
I like it. Yeah. That's great. And then I have one last question for you, which is, because this has just been a pleasure, and thanks so much for being on the show. I think it's going to be exciting for audiences to learn about your work, and also just the points that we brought up about writing. It's going to be wonderful. So who's the next diamond in the rough? Who would you perhaps say, oh, Matthew was fun to, talk to and discuss about writing? Who would you ask to come on the show?
So I have a few people in mind. But in general, I'll just say that you should definitely look out for the authors from Snowy Wings Publishing.
Snowy Winds Publishing. Excellent. Well, hopefully we'll have some links in the description as well with that.
Snowy Wings.
Oh, Snowy Wings. My apologies. Thank you so much, Janina. It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, and look out for the next Diamond Discussions where we interview the next diamond in the rough. Thanks for watching. Would you like to be a guest on the show, or do you know a diamond in the rough who should? Contact us, diamonddragonstale@gmail.com. Until then, Chion, Chifoy, Las Res, and Iye Laha.